The golden halls of Asgard had never felt so cold. I stood in the shadow of the throne, my gaze fixed on the empty seat where Odin, the Allfather, had once ruled with an iron will and a steady hand. Now he lay deep in the Odin sleep, his body still as stone, his mind wandering the unseen paths of the cosmos. The air was heavy with unease, as if the very walls of Valhalla were holding their breath, waiting for the next chapter of Asgard's story to unfold. And then there was Thor. My brother, no, my adopted brother, stood at the center of the great hall, his hammer Mjolnir resting at his side. The gods and warriors of Asgard gathered around him, their voices rising in a chorus of praise and adoration. They spoke of his strength, his courage, his worthiness, as if any of that mattered. As if brute force and a loud voice were all it took to rule the 9 realms. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. I could feel the weight of their stares, the unspoken words that hung in the air like a storm cloud. Loki, the trickster. Loki, the liar. Loki, the outcast. They didn't say it aloud, but I could see it in their eyes, in the way they avoided my gaze. Even now, as Thor basked in their admiration, I was an afterthought, a shadow in the corner of the room. But shadows have their uses. I slipped away from the crowd, my footsteps silent on the polished floor. The corridors of Asgard were familiar to me, their twists and turns etched into my memory like the lines of a spell. I moved with purpose, my mind racing. Odin's vault. That was where I needed to go. The vault was a place of secrets, a treasure trove of artifacts and relics from across the 9 realms. It was also forbidden to all but the Allfather himself. But rules had never stopped me before. The doors loomed before me, massive and imposing, their surfaces carved with runes that glowed faintly in the dim light. I traced a finger over the symbols, feeling the hum of ancient magic beneath my skin. With a whispered incantation, the doors creaked open, revealing the treasures within. I stepped inside, my eyes scanning the room. There were weapons of unimaginable power, jewels that glimmered with stolen light, and objects whose purposes I could only guess at. But I wasn't here for any of that. I was here for something far more valuable. It was tucked away in a corner, hidden beneath a cloth of shimmering silver. I pulled it aside, revealing a stone tablet covered in runes so old they seemed to pulse with a life of their own. My breath caught in my throat as I leaned closer, my fingers brushing against the surface. The runes shifted, rearranging themselves into words I could understand. When the serpent's tongue speaks truth, the throne shall be claimed by the unlikeliest hand. I read the words again and again until they burned into my mind. A prophecy about the throne of Asgard. And it wasn't pointing to Thor. My heart raced as the implications sank in. The unlikeliest hand. The serpent's tongue. It could only mean one thing. Me. I had always been the outcast, the misfit, the one who didn't belong. But what if that was the point? What if my very nature, my cunning, my intelligence, my ability to see the world in ways others couldn't, was what Asgard needed? A voice broke through my thoughts, sharp and commanding. Loki! I turned to see Frigga standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. The queen of Asgard, my mother, though not by blood, was a figure of grace and wisdom, her presence both comforting and unnerving. What are you doing here? She asked, her voice calm but firm. I hesitated, my mind racing for an explanation. But then I decided to tell the truth. Or at least part of it. I was curious, I said, gesturing to the tablet. I found this. It's a prophecy. Frigga's eyes flicked to the tablet, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of recognition in her gaze. But she said nothing, only stepped closer, her movements deliberate. Prophecies are dangerous things, she said softly. They can lead us down paths we were never meant to walk. I frowned, my frustration bubbling to the surface. But what if this is my path? What if I'm meant to rule Asgard? Frigga's expression softened, and she reached out to touch my cheek. Oh, Loki, the throne is not a prize to be won. It is a burden to be borne, and it changes those who sit upon it. Her words struck a chord, but I pushed the feeling aside. She didn't understand. She couldn't. Thor isn't ready, I said, my voice low. He's reckless, impulsive. He'll lead Asgard to ruin. And you think you can do better? Frigga asked, her tone gentle but probing. I met her gaze, my resolve hardening. I know I can. For a long moment she said nothing, her eyes searching mine. Then she sighed, a sound heavy with regret. Be careful, Loki. Power gained through deceit will only lead to ruin. Her words lingered in the air as she turned and walked away, leaving me alone with the tablet and the weight of my thoughts. I looked down at the runes, their glow faint but steady. The serpent's tongue, the unlikeliest hand, the throne of Asgard. A plan began to form in my mind, intricate and daring. If Thor wasn't fit to rule, then I would show them all what I was capable of. I would prove that I was more than just the trickster, more than just the outcast. I would prove that I was worthy. But as I left the vault, the tablet clutched tightly in my hands. I couldn't shake the feeling that Frigga's warning was more than just a mother's concern. It was a prophecy of its own, and I was walking straight into its grasp. The halls of Asgard were alive with whispers. I moved through them like a ghost, my presence unnoticed, my intentions hidden. The tablet from Odin's vault was safely stashed away, its prophecy burning in my mind like a brand. The words asterisk, the unlikeliest hand, asterisk echoed in my thoughts, a constant reminder of what I was meant to do. But words alone wouldn't be enough. If I was to claim the throne, I needed more than a prophecy. I needed a plan. My first move was subtle, almost imperceptible. I began to sow seeds of doubt among the courtiers and warriors who gathered in the great hall. A whispered comment here, a raised eyebrow there. Nothing overt, nothing that could be traced back to me. But enough to make them question. Thor is strong, yes, I murmured to a group of nobles as they debated the future of Asgard. But strength alone does not make a king. What of wisdom? What of foresight? They nodded, their expressions thoughtful. I could see the doubt creeping into their eyes, the cracks forming in their unwavering loyalty to Thor. It was a start, but I needed more. I turned my attention to the frost giants. The Jotun had always been a thorn in Asgard's side, their icy realm of Jotunheim a constant source of tension. Thor, in his usual brash manner, had been eager to confront them, to prove his strength and secure his place as the future king. But I saw an opportunity. I slipped into the shadows, my magic cloaking me as I made my way to the Bifrost. Heimdall, the ever-watchful guardian, stood at the bridge's edge, his golden eyes scanning the horizon. Heimdall, I said, stepping into the light. He turned to me, his expression unreadable. Loki, what brings you here? I need passage to Jotunheim, I said, keeping my tone casual. Heimdall's gaze narrowed. The All-Father has forbidden travel to Jotunheim without his express permission. I smiled, my voice smooth as silk. And yet the All-Father sleeps. Surely in his absence we must use our own judgment. I go not to wage war, but to seek understanding. To prevent a conflict that could cost us dearly. Heimdall studied me for a long moment, his eyes piercing. Then, to my surprise, he nodded. Very well, but tread carefully, Loki. The frost giants are not to be underestimated. I stepped onto the Bifrost, the rainbow bridge shimmering beneath my feet. As the light engulfed me, I felt a thrill of anticipation. This was where the game truly began. Jotunheim was a frozen wasteland, its jagged peaks and icy plains stretching as far as the eye could see. The air was biting cold, but I welcomed it. It reminded me of my true heritage, the blood of the frost giants that flowed through my veins. I made my way to the heart of their stronghold, where their king, Loki, awaited. Loki Laufeyson, Loki said as I entered the throne room, his voice a low rumble. What brings you to Jotunheim? I come with an offer, I said, my tone calm and measured. An alliance, Loki's eyes narrowed. An alliance? With Asgard? Not with Asgard, I corrected. With me. I laid out my plan, careful to appeal to Loki's pride and ambition. I spoke of Thor's recklessness, of the chaos that would ensue if he were to rule. And I offered a solution, a staged attack, one that would expose Thor's flaws and weaken his standing in Asgard. In return, I promised the frost giants a place of honor in the new order I would create. Loki listened in silence, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he leaned back in his throne, his fingers steepled. You ask much, Loki, he said at last. But if you succeed, it could benefit us both. Very well. We will play your game. But know this, if you betray us, there will be no place in the 9 realms where you can hide. I smiled, my mind already racing ahead. You have my word. As I left Jotunheim, I felt a surge of satisfaction. The pieces were falling into place, but there was one more move to make. Back in Asgard, I sought out Frigga. She was in her chambers, her hands busy with a tapestry that depicted the history of our realm. Her eyes were distant, her thoughts far away. "Mother," I said, stepping into the room. She looked up, her expression softening as she saw me. "Loki." "What is it?" I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "I need your help." Frigga set aside her work, her gaze steady. "What kind of help?" "Thor is planning an attack on Jotunheim," I said, my voice low. "He believes it will secure his place as king. But it will only lead to war. I need you to convince him to reconsider." Frigga's eyes narrowed. "And why would he listen to me?" "Because you are his mother," I said, my tone earnest. "Because he trusts you. If anyone can make him see reason, it's you." Frigga studied me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she sighed. "I will speak to him," she said. "But Loki, be careful. The path you are walking is a dangerous one." I nodded, my heart heavy with the weight of her words. But I couldn't turn back now. The stage was set. The players were in place. All that remained was to watch the drama unfold. The air in Asgard was thick with tension, like the calm before a storm. I stood at the edge of the great hall, watching as Thor addressed the gathered warriors and nobles. His voice boomed with confidence, his words filled with promises of glory and victory. But I could see the cracks beneath the surface, the uncertainty in his eyes, the way his hands clenched and unclenched around Mjolnir. He was faltering, and I was ready to strike. The Frost Giant's attack had gone exactly as planned. Their staged assault on Asgard's borders had been swift and brutal, leaving destruction in its wake. Thor, ever the hero, had led the charge to repel them, but his impulsiveness had cost us dearly. The damage to the Bifrost was extensive, and the casualties among our warriors were higher than anyone had anticipated. The whispers had started almost immediately. "Thor's recklessness has brought us to the brink of war," I murmured to a group of nobles as they gathered in the aftermath. "Is this the kind of leader we want? A king who acts first and thinks later?" They nodded, their expressions grim. I could see the doubt in their eyes, the seeds I had planted beginning to take root. But I wasn't done yet. I made my way to the throne room, where Frigga sat in quiet contemplation. Her hands were folded in her lap, her gaze distant. "Mother," I said, stepping into the room. She looked up, her expression softening as she saw me. "Loki." "What is it?" "I need your help," I said, my tone earnest. "Thor's actions have put Asgard in danger. The people are losing faith in him. If we don't act now, we risk losing everything." Frigga studied me for a long moment, her eyes searching mine. Then she sighed. "What would you have me do?" "Call a council," I said. "Let the people decide who should lead them. Let them see the truth for themselves." Frigga hesitated, her gaze flicking to the empty throne. Then she nodded. "Very well. I will call a council. But Loki, be careful. The path you are walking is a dangerous one." I nodded, my heart heavy with the weight of her words. But I couldn't turn back now. The council was called that evening, the great hall filled with the gods and warriors of Asgard. Thor stood at the center, his expression defiant, but I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. "My people," Frigga began, her voice steady. "We stand at a crossroads. The recent attack has left us vulnerable, and we must decide how to move forward. It is time for us to choose our leader." The room erupted in murmurs, the tension palpable. I stepped forward, my voice cutting through the noise. "Brothers and sisters of Asgard," I said, my tone calm and measured. "We have all seen the consequences of Thor's actions. His recklessness has brought us to the brink of war. Is this the kind of leader we want? A king who acts first and thinks later?" The murmurs grew louder, the doubt in their eyes growing. Thor stepped forward, his expression furious. "You dare question my leadership?" he demanded, his voice booming. "I dare to speak the truth," I replied, my tone steady. "The truth that you are too blind to see. You are not ready to rule, Thor. And if you continue down this path, you will lead us all to ruin." The room fell silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Thor's eyes burned with anger, but I could see the doubt creeping in. "Enough," Frigga said, her voice firm. "The people will decide." The vote was swift and decisive. When the results were announced, the room erupted in murmurs. Thor had lost, and I had won. As I stepped forward to claim the throne, I felt a surge of triumph. The prophecy had been fulfilled. The unlikeliest hand had claimed the throne. But as I sat upon the throne, the weight of the crown heavy upon my brow, I couldn't shake the feeling that Frigga's warning was more than just a mother's concern. It was a prophecy of its own, and I was walking straight into its grasp. The throne of Asgard was mine, but it felt heavier than I had imagined. The golden halls, once filled with the laughter and camaraderie of gods and warriors, now echoed with silence. The weight of the crown pressed down on my brow, a constant reminder of the burden I had taken upon myself. The prophecy had been fulfilled. The unlikeliest hand had claimed the throne. But as I sat upon it, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The first days of my rule were marked by triumph. I had proven myself to the people of Asgard, showing them that I was more than just the trickster, more than just the outcast. I had solved problems that had plagued the realm for centuries, using my intellect and cunning where brute force had failed. The people began to see me in a new light, their whispers of doubt replaced by murmurs of admiration. But beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to form. Thor's exile had left a void in Asgard, one that I had not anticipated. The warriors who had once followed him with unwavering loyalty now looked to me for guidance, but their eyes were filled with uncertainty. They had trusted Thor's strength, his courage, his worthiness, and though I had proven myself in my own way, I could see the doubt in their eyes. And then there was Frigga. My mother, though not by blood, had always been a source of wisdom and comfort. But since my ascension to the throne, she had grown distant, her eyes filled with a sadness I couldn't quite understand. "Loki," she said one evening as we stood together in the great hall, "you have achieved what you set out to do. But at what cost?" I frowned, my frustration bubbling to the surface. "I have done what needed to be done. I have saved Asgard from Thor's recklessness. What more do you want from me?" Frigga's expression softened, and she reached out to touch my cheek. "I want you to see the truth, Loki. The truth about yourself. The truth about the throne." Her words lingered in the air, a haunting echo of the prophecy that had set me on this path. When the serpent's tongue speaks truth, the throne shall be claimed by the unlikeliest hand. But what was the truth? The answer came sooner than I expected. It began with a dream. I found myself standing in a vast, empty hall, the walls lined with mirrors that reflected my image back at me. But the reflections were not my own. They were twisted, distorted versions of myself, some laughing, some weeping, some filled with rage. And then I saw her. Skuld, the Norn, stood at the center of the hall, her eyes filled with a knowing light. "Loki," she said, her voice a whisper that echoed through the hall. "You have claimed the throne, but at what cost? The serpent's tongue speaks truth, but have you listened?" I woke with a start, my heart racing. The dream lingered in my mind, a haunting reminder of the prophecy that had set me on this path. And then the truth began to unravel. It started with a whisper, a rumor that spread through the halls of Asgard like wildfire. The frost giants, emboldened by their recent attack, were preparing for war. And they were not alone. The other realms, sensing Asgard's vulnerability, had begun to stir. The dark elves, the fire giants, even the Vanir, all were preparing to strike. I had thought myself clever, using the frost giants to expose Thor's flaws. But in doing so, I had weakened Asgard's defenses, leaving us vulnerable to attack. The throne was not a prize to be won. It was a burden to be borne. And I had failed to see the truth. The final blow came when Thor returned. He appeared at the gates of Asgard, his hammer Mjolnir in hand, his eyes filled with a fire I had never seen before. "Loki," he said, his voice steady but filled with anger. "You have played your games long enough. It is time to end this." I stood before him, the crown heavy upon my brow, my mind racing. I had thought myself clever, using my cunning to outmaneuver him. But now, as I looked into his eyes, I saw the truth. Thor was not the enemy. I was. The battle that followed was fierce, the clash of our powers shaking the very foundations of Asgard. But in the end, it was not strength that decided the outcome. It was truth. As we stood face to face, our weapons raised, I realized that I could not win. Not like this. "Thor," I said, my voice steady. "I surrender." The words hung in the air, a stark contrast to the chaos that had preceded them. Thor lowered his hammer, his expression filled with confusion. "Why?" he asked. "Because I was wrong," I said, my voice filled with a clarity I had not felt in a long time. "The throne is not a prize to be won. It is a burden to be borne." And I was not ready to bear it. Thor nodded, his expression softening. "And now, I said, I will help you bear it." The days that followed were marked by reconciliation. Thor reclaimed the throne, his rule marked by humility and wisdom. And I, though stripped of my crown, found a new purpose, not as a king, but as a brother. The prophecy had been fulfilled, but not in the way I had expected. The serpent's tongue had spoken the truth, and in doing so, it had set me free. As I stood in the great hall, watching as Thor addressed the people of Asgard, I felt a sense of peace I had not known in a long time. The throne was not a prize to be won. It was a burden to be borne. And in the end, it was not the throne that defined me. It was the choices I made when no one was watching. The end.